All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight on your brain. What are we talking about today, Samu?
Well, we are talking Overthinking Wheel of Time again, and it's another romance edition. This might be the last romance edition. We're going to try to cover three main romances, but we have a couple comments on some other ones to begin with. And Yeah, so we'll get right on that. It will be kind of a sexy time with Sam episode. I am a physiologist and a psychologist in training, and we're just guys that have had relationships. So that's also
And
part of it.
we've both
And
been
so
married forever,
Yeah,
so
and hopefully you glean something from this because, it's always good to look at even fictional characters and, hear other people's opinions because you may have this one nagging thing that's bothering you, or you have this thing that's going well for you. And you have if you have something that's going well for you, put it in the comments. We do have some comments to get to if we want to do that first, but
well, let's do that first. As you've said a number of times that you grew up in a crappy family situation and you didn't know what a dad was supposed to be until you started hanging out with us and being around my dad.
Mhm. Well,
And
I had a
and
couple good male role models in
mhm,
in my life, which is kind of the key. It doesn't have to be your biological
yeah.
dad, though that is the best situation because they're the most likely to do it, being biological, genetics and all.
Mhm,
But my grandfather was a good influence, and my uncles were kind of pushed away by my stepfather that was in the way, but they were good influences as
mhm.
well. And then your dad came in when I was in high school at a time when I was desperate about it. So
Which is a big deal for someone who is now yourself a father, and
mhm.
that's important. You know,
Well, and one
it's
reason I think I have a lot to say on some of these topics is because I had to learn everything the hard way by doing. I didn't
mm,
have that early example that you just kind of develop a heuristic in your head and a model that you go by. I had to create my own model from first principles, basically,
yeah.
which means a lot of mistakes along the way. All right. As far as comments, I'm going to go actually back to our Demandred episode because we never addressed those. Uh, Isomorphic says he is missing the series already since he's finished reading it, which is great. Spend a little time, marinate, live a little, and then read it again. But he's also been writing some of his own stuff, and he loves uh, how Jordan would pay off without payoff sometimes, and it
Mm,
wasn't always just this cookie cutter. I'm setting this up, and here you go. Sometimes something bad happens, and you're like, oh crap,
mm.
real life, right?
Well, that was his comment that Sanderson related a number of times about the last battle is how abrupt. Like, so as fans, it didn't always feel satisfying because wait, that person's dead, and sometimes it even happens off screen, off page. But that was something RJ intended, is that sometimes you would get a really dramatic, focused death scene of an important character. But I mean, again, a two-tour combat veteran in Vietnam, sometimes life just happens and it smacks you out of nowhere,
Mhm.
just sucker punches you. And so that was part of his style of why he did what he did.
And then we got Gumble the Bear. You used the thumbnail from the horrible abomination of a show, so I'm sorry I cannot take this video seriously, which I commented back. The thumbnails are supposed to not be serious. But also, I wonder how deeply this person thought, Gumble thought into this because it was Stradowski in another show.
Mhm.
And I think he just saw Stradowski and went right into, dogging the show and actually associating us with it. But no, that was actually Stradowski from another show and read the joke on the thumbnail if you
Yeah.
can blow it up. So yeah, I think that might be just one of those click on it, comment, and then click away kind of situations. If not, and you're seeing this, Gumble, you feel free to correct us in the comments. And then ideals again, addressing Sam's point, and this one might lead us right into what we're talking about here, because you want to talk Thailand a little bit more.
Mhm.
Addressing Sam's point on jealousy, and this is speaking of Demandred, I think that a pretty cool thing shown with Demandred is that somewhat counterintuitively, the most gifted men and women, I will put in there, are the ones capable of the most jealousy and resentment. And yes, 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 because we are also dealing with something we talked about in our last episode, a lot of narcissism.
Mhm.
And narcissism is born of insecurity. and jealousy is born of insecurity. They follow a similar pathway. And if you've got a big dose of one, you probably got a big healthy dose of the other.
Yeah. Um, which is where I'm trying not to get too derailed in my train of
Yeah, we
thought
got
here,
one more
but
comment. So yeah, just give a quick little, and I'll make a
um,
note if it's something I want to expand on.
well, it's another good point to reinforce one of the keys we talk about when we talk psychological mumbo jumbo, which is almost all of these traits aren't bad inherently. They are like last time we talked Dark Tetrad because we were
Mhm.
talking about Superman and Lex Luthor and my thoughts on both the movie and the general, IP. And yes, someone like a fictional character, Lex Luthor, or you'll pick any number of historical or even modern examples that use those traits badly. They do bad things with those traits. They aren't inherently bad. It's what you do with them. Same thing with jealousy. You can jealously protect someone or something, and that can be a good thing,
Well,
especially if
it,
that
it
is
was
someone
it
or
was
something that needs
100%
protecting.
necessary when we had zero parental certainty, and yeah,
Yeah. So you see where someone like Perrin, maybe it goes a little too far sometimes, and maybe yeah, it annoys Fail sometimes, but then sometimes she likes it because it's yeah, he is being protective because he's your man, and that's what he
yeah.
does.
Well, it's the underlying theme of emotion appropriately placed, right? Anger appropriately placed can
Yeah,
save your life.
yeah.
Fear appropriately placed can save your life. Fear of the unknown future is what we call anxiety, right? Inappropriately placed. Unless you're anxious about something that is very important and that allows you to take a step in protecting yourself from it in the future, which is something we have over all the rest of the animal kingdom, up to about 5 minutes with dogs, but us the rest of our lives, we get to think about how we're going to die because we know we will at some point. We just don't know when,
Mm.
and we're constantly protecting ourselves, our future selves, from that. And that's what the advantage we have over everything else is we have that future foresight, which is also why we're so effed up in the head. Why zebras don't have ulcers. Read the book Sapolsky. Uh, all
There's a
right,
reason we reference it a lot. Yeah.
last comment is actually on the Matt Tylan and Tuan episode. It might be when we mention Nynaeve at the end, because he says a big missed opportunity is romance between Logain and Nynaeve. Who can forget, and this scene was very well written, who can forget the legendary scene of her restoring his powers, and he put in parentheses manhood, and suddenly realizing how big and imposing he is, how handsome he is, how long his black hairs are. It truly was a fork in the pattern, and all it took was a little push for the story to go another direction. Nynaeve urgently whispering in Logain's ear, her spittle landing wetly on his earlobe. I did you a big favor. Now I need a big favor from you. Show me, petty lord. Show me how to be a lady for my land.
Well,
This
I
is
do declare ideals. You
yeah,
have
you should write a little smut novel stuff. That's not bad right there. But this is actually something I after reading this comment about a week ago or whenever you did it, uh this is something that was actually missing, unless you can think of an example for me in the Wheel of Time. There was really no Guinevere Lancelot moment. There was really no that forbidden love moment, at least with any of the main characters.
uh, the closest that I can think of was the almost of Fail and the big brotherless dude.
Oh yeah. Okay, that I think that counts because she
And
really did have feelings for him. Yeah.
and depending on which story you read, I believe in the Mort d'Arthur, which is kind of the original quote unquote, although these stories go back. Lancelot and Guinevere never actually had an affair in the modern sense.
Mm,
But at the time, it was bad enough to be lusting after each other,
hmm
especially, not only not married to each other, but you're married to someone else, and oh, you're supposed to be his best friend,
hmm
right? So it was bad enough that there was a lustful inclination, and to them that was an affair, and that is, I wonder if RJ was purposely paralleling or having a bit of an influence there, because again, nothing happened, in our sense, but in their, you see, even though again nothing happened, you see what nothing can do when it is allowed to kind of fester in the back of your mind.
hmm
And that's the only one I can think of. um
I mean, you get
the
hints of maybe Thom and Morgase when Morgase was with Damodred. So
yeah, you there is some backstory there that you
there's
can you
hints
kind of have to
that she
fill in.
wasn't quite single
Hmm.
at the time. Yeah.
Hmm. um because Thom thinks, at one point he implies, from one of his points of view, that he got rid of him
hmm
because Damodred was trying to get rid of Morgase, and Morgase didn't realize it. So there's a strong inclination there that uh, what's his bucket, the Karhinen king, was the second king, although Damodred technically wasn't a king, that Thom killed, um, because he's just that cool. Uh, but to Isomorphic's comment there, there is, it's not a Lancelot Guinevere moment, but there is a something I hadn't thought about when we talked about Matt and Tylan, is that would have been an interesting, you talk about the fork in the road, but also an interesting parallel and callback to New Spring, because what you're talking about there with that, what could have been with Logain and Nynaeve, is very much what was happening with, I don't remember her name, but the noble lady that was, whatever the term was, but basically uh the man maker of
Oh
land
yeah,
when he
yeah,
was a
yeah,
youngin.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that Malkiri tradition uh of theirs, and then she kind of abuses that connection,
hmm
um in a very, and I can't believe I didn't think about this, but I've only read New Spring a couple of times, and I actually usually don't reread it if I'm doing a full reread of the series. I usually end up skipping it just because I'm caught up in the main storyline. Um, the next time I do a reread, I should probably actually start with New Spring,
Well, let
just
me
to be fair
let
to
me
it.
segue as to the first thing you wanted to talk about. So we're going to go into Siuan and Bryne, Pevara and Androl, Lan and Nyneave, and all those contrasts, because those are the good. But
Hmm.
you had mentioned right before we started you wanted to talk about Tylan and I wanted to say something about Egwene, and you said toxic relationships
Yep.
and what constitutes a toxic relationship, and you just brought up a great example here is we talked a little bit about this when we did New Spring, or I did anyways, of when tradition hampers what real life is, even though it's based on something that could be beneficial to culture or a person in general, civilization in general. Rites of passage are a big thing, right? That's
Hmm.
something we lack as at least I would say Westerners, but Americans, we really lack rites of passage. We have little things like you made the football team or something stupid like that, but we don't have a tradition here of you are a man now. And that Malkiri tradition, well, who's to say what's wrong with having a sexuality based tradition be a rite of passage to be a man? That's led by an older woman. What's wrong with that compared to go out and kill a lion, right? Either way, you're taking risk rewards, right? And I mean, having sex for the first time is a part of becoming a man. Uh, we all remember that first time, I think. If you don't remember the first time, I'm sorry, it was bad. Uh, Actually, if it was too bad, you'd remember it too. But I'm sorry you had a boring performance. But I remember my first time, and it is a time as a man where you say, ah, I have crossed this Rubicon. I have done this thing that grown-ups do that little boys don't do or shouldn't be doing, right? And so I don't have a problem with that being a rite of passage. Where it becomes toxic is it became a power dynamic.
Hmm.
She used it to control and manipulate him. Tylan and Matt, yes, it was something he wanted. It was something that, or he didn't complain too hard about. And it was fun and a lot of these other things. But there was a few moments where it was more than just being wanting to be a dominant in the bed. It was a dominant position, period. When she would dress him, when she would mark
Uh-huh.
him, when she would, so it was a power struggle, and she was getting off to that, and he was accepting that because he liked other things about her.
And because he was in a position where he couldn't do too much about it
Hmm.
anyway,
Yeah, there
until
was a lot
the
of coping
end.
in his mind. Yeah,
And it certainly was becoming toxic by the end. And
I think it started more toxic than it ended. I think
mhm.
the trapping him in the room and all of
See,
the things that led to the first time were more toxic than when he finally kind of just gave up to it.
I'm still of the mind that if he really wanted out of there, he's Matt. He could have gotten out of there. Um, and that is why I think it was worse later because
Yeah,
on
but it
Tylen's part,
could he
because
though? Because she was also playing on something she knew about him and his agreeableness. She picked that
mhm.
up, that he was an easy target. Bullies pick their targets.
Well, that's true. She didn't have to know why. Like I hadn't thought before until we talked about it last time of he couldn't have pulled that knife away because it wasn't that long ago that he killed Melindra,
Hmm.
and you saw what that did to him.
Well,
She doesn't need to know why he's that way, but she could pick up that he is that way.
and also there was probably a part of him saying that she's really not going to kill me.
Yeah.
Uh,
But the reason I think it became worse later is to those things that you said is it stopped being a game and started being a power play. And were it anyone else but Matt, or someone as powerful in all the ways that he is, as strong as Matt is, they would have been smothered by her and
mhm.
what she was doing. He was really only able to stand up to a degree and ultimately get out of it because of who he was. Anyone else would have been, you know, even her son, brain farting on
Beslin.
his name. Yeah,
Beslin.
Veselin was like, yeah, this is going a little too far.
Hmm.
Originally it was, I'm glad she chose you as her whatever term they call it, uh, there in Ibu Dar, this tradition of an older woman taking a an older widow taking a younger man. And it's like, I'm glad it's you. You're cool. And then a little later, it was, yeah, mom might be going a little too far with this. But I think that's a good way to differentiate a bad relationship or a relationship that's not very standard or traditional versus an actual toxic relationship. Toxicity comes in when you start imposing control and using these things to assert power.
Yeah, and that's why the modern dating scene is so bad because everything's a power struggle now. It's who's getting the advantage when. And I don't have to deal with it myself. But I mean all my younger single friends, it's just I watch, I observe.
Mhm.
I'm part of it. I'm out with them. I wingman. I do all of that stuff. And I'm just gosh, this is not going to be more than tonight. We know it. Just everybody just do
Yep.
your thing. Thank God for birth control, and let's get to the next day. It just sucks. It really does suck. And I'm like, how do we even square this circle when it comes to that? I have a few ideas. We brought them up before, leaning into interests and going meeting people in person, that kind of stuff. But God, it's a clusterfuck out there. It's bad.
Speaking of toxic, here's another. So this is from my wife, her kind of definition and what she cues in on when one of her friends is in a toxic relationship is if the person is holding you back from being your best self,
Mm,
and
yeah.
especially purposefully so, of I don't want you to do that thing that would be good for you personally, good for your career, good for whatever, because it makes me feel bad or because I don't like it.
Hmm.
Which segues us into what were your thoughts on Egwene and Colin?
Well, expand that thought a little bit too. Jordan Peterson, there's actually a nice. I hate Instagram Reels because they butcher everything, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
nice one with Peterson making this statement that when you truly fall in love with somebody, you don't fall in love with what's right in front of you. You fall in love
Mm-hmm.
with the potential of that person. And if you're truly in love, you will be doing everything you can to help them reach that potential. And that's a pretty good definition of long-term love, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just, ooh, I'm hot, horny, and ready to go, you know? So yeah, that I think that's a good heuristic to use when if you are in the dating scene or if you're single looking for somebody. Do you have thoughts of the future in that first meeting? Not like getting creeper stage 5 clinger. I'm talking about, oh, this person is somebody I think will develop into something that is great for us. And then
And that's
hopefully, yeah, go
that's
ahead.
why I think Gawain and Egwene, you could call that a toxic relationship because there are moments where they're clearly trying, and there are flashes where it looks like they might do it, but then they never do.
Well, and you brought up something with Egwene, and this is the point I wanted to make with her, and she's toxic before she's with Godwin. You brought up the moment when Matt left Saladar, and he takes a knee and he says, "Well, damn it, this
Mm-hmm.
is my sister, quote unquote friend, and I have her back no matter what." You know who never appreciated that? Egwene. That was
Mm-hmm.
a masculine moment that gave her power in the moment over the people she needed power over. All she saw was a guy bowing to her. The power dynamic was between her and him, but the real power dynamic in his mind was between her and the Aes Sedai in Saladar. And she never appreciated that. She did a lot to climb the ladder, as we've discussed in length. She was a true Amerlin from the standpoint of what it meant to be the servant of all and everything when she made her climb in the tower. But she never appreciated the men in her life that helped her with that,
Mm-hmm.
including Godwin.
There's the tiniest glimmer of it in the meeting out on the ice, um when
With Talmanes. Yeah.
when Ptolemy says that, basically tells her, Matt left me here to keep an eye on you. I was always here just in case you needed help, but you never needed help, did you? And so there's the tiniest glimmer of, oh, Matt was keeping an eye on me even when he couldn't be here keeping an eye on me, you know, thanks, Matt. But she's still more focused on, as you put it, climbing the ladder. Because look at how she used
Mhm.
Talmanis and how she used the dragon sworn as a you know floating cudgel to kind of beat the Aes Sedai in the direction she wanted them to go.
Mhm. Well, and I think that there's a key word, and this is one of the key, when you really are going through the self-help and all this stuff, uh, shit show that's on the internet these days, the ones that have it right have a certain word in common. And it's not self-care, it's not self this, it's not me. There's no I in it. The word is gratitude. And the thing that frustrated me about Egwene to the nth degree this time through that I read it was she has very little, if almost
Mm.
no gratitude throughout the whole process.
I thought
And
the absolute worst was in Knife of Dreams when she shut off Siuan for coming to rescue her.
hmm
When from Siuan's perspective, that wasn't just the right thing to do. That was something she had to do.
hmm
And Gawain, the way she treated someone after that was pretty crappy. And it probably foreshadowed the way she ended up treating Godwin.
hmm
That may have been part of the point
Well,
of
wasn't he
that.
there and she was pissed at him too?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But then she she kind of sort of lets Siuan back in, but she's constantly kind of browbeating Gawain into
Well, she's trying to make Godwin into what she thinks he needs to be,
yes.
instead of what we just talked about, helping him grow into what he could be. He would have never used the rings if she had appreciated him saving her life from the assassins.
Hmm.
That's what got him in the rabbit hole of using the rings to begin with, was the fact that she didn't acknowledge it and he held back telling her about it because she was browbeating him.
Hmm.
If she had not browbeat him, he probably would have come forward. Hey, I got these things. These are crazy, aren't they?
I so um as an aside, I've mentioned this Greg Owen. It's a new channel I started watching. So I was going and watching some of his other videos, and I watched his video on adolescence, um, and which is a great video. If for anyone who has watched the series or doesn't want to but wants to know what all the hype is about, he does a really good job of explaining why it's technically such good drama, but also why it is so, to use the phrase of the day, toxic in this idea of turning boys into young men so they can be good men of age. And someone, I'm going to steal someone's comment that they made on the video, which I thought was great, which is this is what happens when you raise successive generations with a focus on self-esteem instead of self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Gawain's problem. And this is where we segue into Gareth Bryne, the established, mature man. Bryne has self worth because he has accomplished things, accomplished great things. He has pushed himself to his potential. And so he is comfortable in his own skin.
Slightly midlife
Esteem,
crisising,
slightly
slightly.
midlife crisis,
Yeah.
when the young lady bats her eyes at him. But Gawain's problem is the problem with self esteem is other people esteem you. That is an outside influence. That is getting your identity from what other people think of you, not what you think of yourself. As one of Jordan Peterson's rules in 12 rules for life is, don't compare yourself to who someone else is today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That is the contrast between Gareth Bryne and Gawain Trakand. And that is why Egwene is able to browbeat him so much, because he is so concerned with what she thinks of him that it leads him to self-destructive behavior. Whereas look at all the times um the like the scene where uh Egwene is riding with, I think this is in Path of Daggers, was riding with Gareth Bryne, talking to him, and one of the little cabal of sisters is there. I don't think she's one of the sitters, and she's browbeating him over something, and he's just, yes, I said I, yes, I said I. And it just flows over him. It just
Mm-hmm.
flows over him like you know water off the back of a duck, because he is comfortable in his own skin and he is not going to get bent out of shape because this person thinks they know how to do his job better than he does.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I mean, that's a hard thing to overcome because it's one of the few things that gets under my skin. When a client is like, I think we should do this. I'm like, yeah, your $65 you paid me says otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That's yeah, no, 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 no. I think you prefer that, but that's not what we should be doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that does get under my skin a little bit, but over time you learn to deal with it because you are confident in your ability. If I was a new coach, I probably would have reacted emotionally to that, right? But because I have a track record of success, I can say, okay, I will consider it, but go ahead and hit the next set. That's
That's a good
exactly how
point
you go.
to the contrast, is that this is something Brine chastises him for when Godwin finally comes to meet him, is, look at you. You were challenged and you want to duel everybody. You know, you're why? What do you have to prove? And what would that accomplish?
Well, another
But
thing about going out with the guys to the midtown or whatever, everybody's picking a fight. All these young guys with their testosterone going or trying to get, and I just look at them when they're trying to pick a fight with me and being like, why are we going to ruin both of our evenings? You know, you're going to end up in the hospital. I'm going to get kicked out of the club and maybe go to jail. I'm not going to ruin my life for you.
mhm,
Congratulations, you won. I'm going to be having a drink over there. That's kind of how I handle it. And it's worked so far.
yep. This is why Bryne is able to, I think, win over Siuan because of that self-confidence. Because she sees it, and you don't get a ton of her POVs, but when you do, that is one of the things she is begrudgingly at first in her own mind complimenting Bryne on is how he conducts himself, how he is able to stand so solidly and not give in to what the hall or what some of these other sisters want him to do, but also not fight back, not take the bait to make things worse. All right, did you have any other thoughts on Siuan and Bryne?
Well, I wanted to go to the actual romance, not just what
Oh,
makes
okay.
Brian cool. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on it because think of the timing here.
Mm,
Okay, so we have a lot of moving parts, and back to Isomorphic's comment about how intricate and how nuanced and what was the word he used? Moving parts playing in a symphony is how he
yes,
worded it. Yeah.
yes,
Uh,
symphony.
so we just talked about Brian, and I think we covered where he's at. He is a confident, accomplished male, a little older, maybe slightly uh reminiscing on his youth. Well, we get that in his mind. He not more than slightly. All his men. When they show up for battle with tin pots for helmets, basically, they're all basically I need that meaning of what I had when I was a youth, right?
Yep.
And again, just like I talked about rites of passage, what better way than a romance too, right? There's a reason it's the red car and then the hot young girl, right? It's it's I still got it. There's a little bit of that plus all the other things that go into it. But now we've got Swan. So let's talk about her. She just lost everything. She just lost everything. She was the Emerald Seat. She was the most powerful person in the world. Not the most powerful woman in the world, the most powerful person in the world. Nobody was that powerful since Arthur Hawkwing. Nobody even came close in the 1,000 years since Arthur Hawkwing to the who was the current sitting Emerald Seat. So she just got knocked from that to a youthful nobody that's not even strong in the power anymore. Actually, at that point, she had no power when they met. So somebody who lost her what made her powerful as a Aes Sedai, what made her powerful as an individual. She still had the skills. That's what she could take with her. She lost her maturity. She lost everything. And now she's confronted with somebody who has power over her because of what Logain did, right? So this person has power over her. And I have to wonder, this is something I don't think Jordan purposefully wrote in, but it's accidentally there. When she became more youthful, did she also become hormonally more youthful?
Hmm.
Which, if that happens all at once, and you've lived this life for so long of denial, and we do see in New Spring, she didn't deny that in the beginning. But when she became Emerald and Seat, she denied it.
You know,
So there's 20 years of history of denial of her womanhood. And something that she actually appreciated back when she was younger. Now she's younger again. Does that come back in a flood? Or does that come back in a way that you don't know how to deal with it because you haven't for 20 years? We've all been there with something. You jump on a bike if you haven't ridden a bike for 20 years and everybody says it's like riding a bike, it's still freaking scary for a little bit, right? Uh, so does that I drove a manual stick shift for the first time in 15 years the other day, and that was a couple ground gears away from, but then we got it back. You know, does that come
Yeah.
back in a flood, or are you just normal? Are you the same person you were before that happened? I don't think so, because if your whole body reversed aging, I think all of that comes with it. But what he's picking up on, he references her eyes and all of this, is she still has all the knowledge. She still has all the wisdom. She still has all the confidence. And we emote in that way. You can tell somebody who's been around the block. If you don't know the trained killer, then you're not looking. Okay. So, and I think those things combined, where she is in this physical state, but still has this thing about her. And then he is in this mental state and picks up on her mental state while, I mean, obviously she's considered very attractive and all of those things too. So I think that's a pretty interesting dynamic, because young girls actually love older men in a lot of ways. And this is something that's gone on. They like compet. She is knowledgeable. I'm formulating this thought as we're talking. Young women fall for narcissists because they don't know the difference between competence and show. She has the knowledge to not fall for narcissists. So she is attracted to the competence. Does that make sense?
And she knows who this is, so she knows full well his level of competency.
Mm-hmm.
But that's an interesting point I hadn't considered, because remember, his head maid, his head of household, older woman there, is talking about having her, basically be his chambermaid to keep the old man warm at night, and she's talking about Leanne, and he's thinking about Siuan, and Leanne is obviously she's the yeah, she doesn't have all the Domini tricks down yet because she's trying to she has to get back in practice, but she's the one who's actually purposefully trying to be a seductress, and yet the one that gets Bryne's attention isn't, and he says it's, I want to know why this person would break that oath, but it's this person, it's the person who looked at me with those eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting that. And he's already intrigued because of how can someone with such a youthful face have eyes like that,
Yeah, and I think
and
that
everything
that
that's behind them.
summarizes my 5 minutes of rambling there. Or is he identified that she is something more than she is, based on her emoting, which is her eyes, which is where we get most of our knowledge about somebody, from visual cues. And she, even though she's a young body now, is not going to be. She, young women are attracted to competence. She is not going to be fooled, and she knows better. So those two things combined make them a very, very, very powerful couple.
I Something you said just sparked a thought in my mind that I wonder. I think the moment Swan may have actually been like attracted to Bryne, as opposed to just, oh, that's interesting, but let me shove that down because I got more important things to do. I think maybe the moment that changed for her was when she was healed by Nyneave.
Mm.
And she goes to Bryne, waving the ring in his face, saying, I'm Aes Sedai again. And he's just, yeah, so doesn't change us, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
change me, doesn't change how I feel. You're still Siuan Sanche. We're still us. This doesn't change anything as far as I'm concerned. And she's just absolutely floored. What do you mean? I'm Aes Sedai again. Yeah, so I I followed Siuan Sanche the woman,
Mm-hmm.
and that's still who you are. I think that took her so by surprise, but also
Well, that
opened her
plays
up
into
to the
what I just
idea.
talked about with the competence versus
Hmm.
narcissism. The young male with no competence but has his peacock feathers up would have been threatened by that.
Mhm.
And that would have been what ended a relationship in that situation.
And it is back to where I kind of started here is the difference between self-worth and self-esteem because Gawain can never figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, everything Egwene does to climb her own ladder just leaves him falling further, but not leaving behind, but he falls further down into the pit he's digging for himself. Um, because he doesn't have that worth. And so he can't follow the advice Bryne is trying to give him about being your own man and being the man she needs you to be because he doesn't know what that means. It's like, okay, you're you're telling me how to do this calculus problem, but I don't even know algebra.
Well, and it's a big mistake on a lot of with a lot of young men is be the man she needs you to be. Where's the line between what she's telling you she needs versus what
Mm,
she actually needs? And that's what Godwin could never figure out. In
yeah,
fact, he swung so far on that pendulum, he would do everything she said, and then he would do nothing she said. There was never
yeah.
that balance of, okay, she says this. Okay, I appreciate her perspective on this. And she's right about her own perspective because she's the only one that has it, right? Uh, but also, I see these things. So we're going to fit what she wants into what she needs. And he never could figure that out. He just said, oh, I see this thing. I'm going to act on it. Or she told me to do this. I'm going to do it. And when they conflicted, he went to one extreme or the other. He never said, how do I put these two things together?
So speaking of more mature,
But of course,
does
she
this
never helped either. Egwene never helped
yeah,
either.
no, yeah, in poor Gawain's defense,
Yeah.
Egwene's not really helping there. So does this segue us into Pevara and Androl?
Well, I just want to ask an important question uh, to finish out Siuan and Bryne, and we just brought up Egwene and Gawain. Do you think Jordan purposefully did their relationships the way they are to contrast the two?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that, like I said with this reread, and I hadn't really thought of it before, is their relationship is a frustrating but technically good subversion of expectations because the farm girl and the prince, and they both rise to prominence, and they have this, romance. That's the trope. That is the stereotypical fantasy story, and instead it's a disaster.
Yeah, but I think there's more parallels than you're bringing out there. The farm girl and the prince, but he's the what do they call it? Captain General. He was the heir apparent Captain General, which was what
No,
Brian
yeah,
was,
that's what I
and
mean.
Egwene was the farm girl that
Mhm.
became Amarylline. Swan was the fisher girl that became Amarylline, and she's with the
Yes,
Captain General. So they're actually the exact same situation.
exactly. So that's why I think it is on purpose because this is the trope turn. Egwene and Gawain are the trope turned on its head because it ends tragically, and it's never satisfying. It's never what they want it to be. Whereas even though it is very brief and it also ends sadly, I don't think it's a tragic end because neither one of them, Brine or Sawan, if they knew how they were going to end, they would not change anything
Mm-hmm.
because they died fighting for what they believed in. Um, and and so even though it is sad, it's not tragic because however brief their moment was, they had that moment. They had each other and they went down fighting the fight they wanted to fight.
I like the meme we've used it before, but it was Egwene dying in a useful way, and then it said Egwene haters and Egwene lovers. I see this as a win.
Yeah. Yep. All
Okay,
right.
so Pevara and Androl, Pevara and Androl.
Uh, Theirs is interesting for a couple of reasons to me. One, because it very similar to Brine and Sawan. You have two much more mature individuals coming to romance in their later, especially Pavara. I mean, she's a red, so they're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to even like men. Uh, or if not actively hate them. Um, but also, so even though she is older and more mature, she is very naive when it comes to men and relationships.
Hmm.
And the other thing that's interesting to me about that, I don't know if we delved into too much when we were talking about it. And I'm curious, Scott, Isomorphic, anyone out there, what are your thoughts on if a man and a woman could actually empathically read each other's thoughts and feelings?
That would be so horrible.
Would it work out that way, or would it, as you say, be so horrible? Do you
No,
think that
I
that
think with a lot
Jordan
of,
wrote it realistically for how it would play out?
I think it's one of those things. Okay, so I'm gonna parallel this to what I do for a living. I've trained a lot of married couples, a lot of married couples. In fact, I typically end up with the whole family, right? Some train together very well, and they do the best when they're there together. Some cannot train in the same room together. They have to come to separate sessions or separate groups or whatever it is. And it's about 70-30. 30 can do well together, 70 can't be in the same room together. So I would say, based on that history, 20 years of experience on that, it would probably be the same with the I know what you're thinking,
Mm.
or I can at least feel your emotion. That I think some couples would do super well with it, and I think some would be like, get out of my fucking head. So let me have my mental privacy. I would say it would probably be about the same. That's my opinion, but based on what I've experienced from something that is kind of, I think, similar.
I am also curious who would learn more.
Who would learn
Um,
more?
yeah.
Uh, I, I'm gonna I'm gonna change the word. Who would understand more?
Mm.
Because I think of the big comedy bit. It's a Jewish guy. I can't remember his name, but said men walk around with he said everything's in a file folder and da 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 da. And when a woman asks, "What are you thinking?" He said, "What they don't understand is there's a big giant file cabinet in our head that says nothing." And they cannot come to terms with the fact that that exists. And I
So
think women would actually finally understand, wow, he's just actually thinking about something random. He's making a sandwich and his face is focused on that sandwich. And I say, what are you thinking? He's actually thinking mayonnaise, turkey, tomato, little cheese
that is
instead
a
of instead
good
of
distinction because there's a moment where um Pevara is surprised by something that Androl is thinking, or his emotions, his motivation, and she's surprised. And Androl, he either says or he thinks at her, "You've got a lot to learn about men," and she does. But because she has so many years, so much wisdom, she's able. Not only does she learn, but she's able to understand. And I
Mhm,
think that is what makes their relationship interesting and what makes it grow is that she has the ability and probably more importantly the willingness to understand.
mhm. Well, and let's dive into Pavara first, because what makes her different? Because she's a red, right?
Mhm.
We get insight from why she became a red, right? Her family was killed by a male channeler, and she has her little figurines and all of these things
There
to
was an
remember them by.
uprising of dark friends.
Yes, yes. I think
Yeah.
wasn't it around a male channeler though?
I can't remember that part of it, but there was, some cabal of dark friends had become convinced the Dark One's release was imminent, and so they had started this kind of uprising that ended up
Hmm.
killing a bunch of people, including her whole family.
Okay, so we'll go with the evidence you have. Her reason for becoming a red was her uh animosity towards the taint. It never had anything to do with men. It was the taint, period. She could separate the taint from men. A man that couldn't channel, she had no problem with. Whereas someone like Elida was, super fourth wave feminist, right?
Hmm.
That okay, so funny story from my trip to Germany. The last day we were there, And I was hoping somebody in the room would pick up on the irony here. But the last day we were there, we did all kinds of yard work for her parents because dad's really old and mom had an injury recently. So uh, we were doling out the projects we were going to do. And I was being told all the manly things I was going to do because I was the only one strong enough and capable enough to be in a ladder with a hedge trimmer in one hand, hanging over a shrubbery and a shrubbery, and doing all these things while someone who was in the conversation was holding a mug that said the best man for a job is a woman. No one picked up on the irony in the room. I almost wanted to be like, I'll pick up the leaves. Y'all can do the heavy lifting over there because, you're the best man for the job. But, that was my experience on that last day. But okay, so let's go back to Pevara. She wasn't a man hater. She hated dark friends and the taint. And she felt she could best combat that as a red. And so that's the difference. She hated a thing, an evil, a phenomenon in the world. She didn't hate people. And then we have Androl, who he's been around the block. He's tested himself. He was talked about cliff diving and all these kind of things in his head.
He has an insatiable curiosity about just about everything.
So he would be high in trade openness, which means he's going to not discount anything based on its face value. He's not going to judge any book by its cover. So the fact that she's red was a thought, was a red flag, not to have a pun there, but he was also able to look past it to say, oh, well, that's not how she thinks. Maybe we have a conversation for 3 seconds and we figure out what you actually think. And so that was a good combination there because she didn't think like most reds, and he doesn't think like most men when they see a red.
And he was able to pick up on that pretty early as this one doesn't act like all the others. So she had enough wisdom to be willing and able to understand, but likewise, he had enough wisdom to open the door, literally, because he opens the door and he lets her in when they first start. Okay, something's up, and I think I can trust you, and I think you can trust me, and we need to figure out what's going on here. Is how it all starts.
Yeah, and it's called Theory of Mind, and he talks about his interactions with even the other Black Tower men, and his experiences in his past and everything. The difference between theory of mind and empathy is feeling what somebody else is feeling. Theory of mind is knowing what other people are thinking and feeling. So you can know what other people are thinking and feeling without actually feeling it. Granted, a little bit of both is optimal, but he had an extreme ability to read people. That's why he became like a leadership role, even though he was so weak. Was because he read people, he had experience, he had knowledge. He's that old guy that people come to advice for. And when it came to relationships, up until this point, he was that coaches don't play, you know. And then all of a sudden, another coach walked in.
All right.
So that's Androl and Pevara, and I think that was a good relationship based on, again, Jordan, whether accidentally or not, he figured these things out on
Yes.
who would be good partners.
Yeah. It was another one of those. It's one of the many. Hey, did he know this or did he intuit this? Because it's so
Well, we also don't
seamless.
know if I mean, Jordan was a seemingly outgoing person. And we don't know if he's writing friends and writing family and writing other people he's observed into these relationships. He was a military guy. He had to have known a general at some point in some time and seen them in a relationship, that kind of thing. So we don't know if he was extracting from the world and inserting it into his world too.
But also all the history that he read. So all
Mhm.
these characters from history whose accounts and stories that he had read, and they all just kind of merged together into, uh, I'm trying to remember who wrote the Wisdom of Crowds. Yeah, we kind of started off talking about mob psychology and how that can be bad, but there was someone who wrote a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, because what the basic idea was, you get enough data points, you're going to come to the average.
Hmm.
So you're going to get the right answer. Um, if you have enough data points. And I think that's a lot probably of where his intuitive understanding of human nature comes from, is just how many data points he had, both from his own lived experience and then how well read he was of history and mythology and, fiction and nonfiction. All right. Well, do we want to keep going and go on to
We're
Lan and all
we're
of his landness?
we're under an hour, so we do. Yeah, let's go ahead and go into it. Let's take a quick bathroom break first.
All right. So of course we wanted to talk about Nyneave and Lan, but when we mentioned that, one of the things that popped into my head was also an interesting contrast there, because you do have a male-female relationship that is very interesting with Lan and Moiraine. And then later Moiraine and Thom, although that one's pretty abbreviated. Um, and there's a lot of similarity there, probably purposefully, because were such close friends of Siuan and Bryne, of the way their affection developed over time, uh, as two mature people. Um, but this is one of the very, very few things that the awful show actually did somewhat well. And it had nothing to do with the material, because I've ranted about that before, about the story, but the performers were able to pretty well portray that dynamic that Lan and Moiraine have, and then how Nynaeve showing up kind of changes things, because now you have Lan looking at Nynaeve and going, "Oh, hey, that's something interesting," and now you have a different relationship dynamic, but similar.
Okay, so let me let me go into Lan and Maureen's relationship and how the show got it right, but then also how they ruined it. Okay, so we get New Spring, we get a whole account of their meeting basically, which is the whole book, and how they started their journey together for 20 years looking for the Dragon Reborn. And the thing about Lan and Moiraine in that moment, and you talk about why was it the way it was and not romantic, but we still have that romantic tension there,
Hmm.
that male-female dynamic, that tension, because on Lan's part, he was a young man and he was still bound by this ritual and all of these things. And he was realistically, he was married to that battle that he still thought with the final Valkyrie stand kind of
Hmm.
thing. Well, Moiraine was married too. Moiraine was married when they met because that's why she was a blue. She was 100% married to this mission. She had no emotional space for him. She found a friend, she found a supporter, she found a like-minded individual, but she never had that romance because she was already married. She was already dedicated. And you see this in the early days of any real marriage, if it's, at least legitimate and not arranged or whatever, is they're so intense on this one thing that they don't notice anything else. There could have been a romance there. They have the compatibility that there could have been, but she was already single-mindedly focused on this thing. And so even if he wanted to have a romantic relationship, he had no chance.
It's a good point. And then that's
Okay,
kind
so yeah, go ahead and finish
probably
your thought.
probably on Moraine's part, that's probably what opens things up for Thom, is that, all right, I have found the dragon. He has declared himself dragon. He is on his path. I got a little room for something else here too.
Well, let me get back to Thom though, because there's a difference between Thom and Lan too.
Mhm.
But okay, so they're already married and they make this mission together, right? This is where the show butchered it because what you said is correct, where they were getting it right with him being distracted by Nynaeve was creating tension between him and Moiraine. The problem is they ruined it by having her have a romantic relationship with one. because you took away the single-minded focus of the mission from her.
Yeah. You cheapened both of them. That
Yeah,
that was our rant at the time, and then
because she has no room to be
at the end
jealous.
of the awful of the last season of it was all about Moiraine and Siuan versus the mission. I mean, she's fighting freaking land fear in the show, and what undoes her, what hurts her is she feels Siuan die somehow. And you're like, man, you ain't got time for this. You got Forsaken to fight. That's the Moraine of the source material of the books is I ain't got no time for shenanigans. I got Forsaken to fight. I got a dark one to keep from breaking loose. I got a dragon to help, guide into fulfilling his prophesied role. And it really does cheapen both of those women by um reducing them. It is a very reductive character trait to make them, as well as being just crappily written. I mean, in his three sentences there, Isomorphic wrote a more tawdry and more interesting, you know, relationship than what we saw in three seasons with Siuan and Moiraine in the awful series. But besides being just crappily written, it is incredibly reductive because all that mattered to those characters in the show was their relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And in the
Which
series,
again makes the angst that she felt for Lan for straying from the mission
yes,
actually meaningless because she was doing it the whole time.
yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, and
Not only meaningless, hypocritical.
hypocritical, eh, yes, and her, you get a little bit there. There's kind of this hint of it in that great chapter we spent quite a bit of time on in the Great Hunt, because even though it's a pretty short chapter, there's a lot going on there. That after Moiraine disappears, we don't see her again until the very end, except that one little chapter in the middle where she meets up with Vandian and Adelaus to go through their private library and ask them questions and whatnot. And you see that she understands why Lan is distracted, and she doesn't begrudge him that because she understands it, but also she knows Nynaeve is a very capable woman. To your point earlier about what Peterson says about you're marrying the potential person, she sees that potential uh in Nynaeve, and she knows that Lan needs more than just the mission, uh because she knows that she can only keep him from being self-destructive for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't begrudge him, but she also wants him
Especially
to stay
after she
focused.
gets the insight into the future of
Yes,
that she's not going to even be able to be there to keep him from
exactly.
destroying himself. Yeah.
So it's not that
Sorry,
she's,
spoiler alerts if you
yeah,
haven't read the
she
books.
she doesn't begrudge that. She just wants him to stay focused. She wants the main thing to stay the main thing. I understand why you know you've had flings before, but now this is something serious, and I understand why. And I would even approve if times were different, but right now the main thing needs to stay the main thing,
Hmm.
which is more understandable, is more sympathetic, and is also provides you more insight into both of their characters
Hmm.
in that moment.
So now we can kind of move to Moiraine and Thom. Why was Thom different? Uh, and stray away from. We're done talking about the show. I don't want to talk about the show anymore in this segment. Uh, but why was Moiraine and Thom different than Moiraine and Lan? You were right on the first one. There's three things. You were right on the first one, which is part of the mission's done. Now is just keep the boy alive. And Thom is actually useful to that. So there's her single-minded mission part where she can actually justify keeping Thom around because he's very useful to Rand.
Yeah,
Uh, then the second part is Lan and Nyneave. She's seeing this thing happen. This thing is playing in front of her. She can't help but feel that emotion that this rock she had, even though it wasn't a romantic relationship, is elsewhere now. And now she doesn't have that. She has a void. She has a void in that male masculine uh, stone to lean on. And so Thom is there and willing, right? And then on the third part is what we forget because they actually, he just kind of skirts around the edges of it, but you know it's there. Thom is one of the most charming people in the entire world. He was a court fucking bard. His job was charming people. And add to that the competence, like we talked about with Gareth Bryne, because he's also one of the most skilled players of the game of houses, which she appreciates. So he is a charming, charming person that will break through barriers that Morgase had and then eventually Moiraine had. It doesn't have to come in the form of Matt pinching girls in the butt. It can come in the form of basically Sean Connery. Sean Connery should be Tom Maryland in the remake, and I wish we could bring him back from the grave to do so.
Yeah, yeah. You know, they're they're so similar but different. Is why it makes sense, even though for a lot of people it did feel like it kind of came out of nowhere. But there are those hints there, and they both are going to keep the important things locked inside because they have to, because they've both spent so many years playing the game of houses, and you don't show that kind of vulnerability. Um, but then
Well,
they can
except
be vulnerable with each other.
we get insight into Thom that he has that vulnerability when he's with the girl in Carhine
Yeah,
that ends up getting killed, and he goes and
exactly.
murders on her behalf. This man is a passionate, passionate man.
Hmm.
He's just a very well-spoken, passionate man.
Yeah. Um, so wrapping up with Lan and Nyneave, we've talked about we talked about them through the as we were rereading quite a bit, and why it works and why it has to work. But one of my favorite moments, I was just talking to my son about because he just finished A Crown of Swords, and when Lan shows up, it is Nynaeve very quickly starts to become more likable and more understandable when they have that dynamic together. And specifically, when they go to find the Bowl of Winds, there's a lot going on in that scene. And it's one of the best action scenes, I think, in the whole series because there's so much going on and because of the way Jordan writes it. But one of the things that jumped out to me the first time I read it and stuck with me, and I made the point to him was notice how Lan is the ultimate warder, even though Nynaeve doesn't actually have his bond, and yet he seamlessly and immediately slides into that role. And for many books to come, I didn't tell him this part. For many books to come, she's not going to have his bond, and it doesn't matter because their connection is that strong, coupled with his, to use your word earlier, very high degree of competency
Mm-hmm.
in this role. That he just seamlessly knows what she needs to, going back to Gareth Bryne trying to give advice to Galwin, is he's been around the block enough to know what an Aes Sedai needs in a warder. He's taught other warders. He's mentored other warders, as well as just being a role model for warders in general, is what he's thought of. But Nynaeve specifically, he knows this woman as a woman more than any others because she is so closed off to the rest of the world because she thinks she has to be. And this is one of the very few people who she has ever opened up to.
Mm-hmm.
And that matters. That's why he's able to do what he does in scenes like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he also has experience of very shut tight woman opening up to him, which is Moiraine. I mean,
That's a good
he's kind
point.
of he's got some training in this, and we saw the growing pains of that training, dunking each other in water, and that kind of thing. The mistrust that was there in the beginning that they had to work through.
That's a good
It,
point.
yeah,
That he has already gone. They have both kind of already gone through. Now, Nynaeve still has some growing up to do because she's literally younger, but because she was orphaned and because of her training as a wisdom and then assuming the role of wisdom at a very young age, she has had to mature too quickly. It's one of the reasons she's so
she wasn't an
um
orphan; she had a father
she
who
was
taught her how to
orphaned in,
track. Remember?
yes, but they died of a fever, I think, in her teenage years. So she wasn't orphaned as a child, but by the time we meet her, her parents have died young.
Hmm.
And to that point, she clearly had a very strong relationship with her parents, especially her father.
Hmm.
And so you've got that, you've got the apprenticeship, you've got assuming this role of leadership at a very young age, and you can see why she is the way she is. Um, but because of what Lan has been through, he's able to deal with it in much the same way that Bryne is able to just sit there and nod and yeah, yes, Aes Sedai, no Aes Sedai, because he is supremely confident in his own skin,
Hmm.
as well as just literally, to your point, having had similar such experiences for 20 years now,
Hmm.
having to deal with Moiraine, which I hadn't really considered before about how closed off she is. Um, just in a different way than the way Nynaeve is. They're both very focused. They're both very driven, and they're both
Stubborn
very stubborn. Yeah,
and unwilling to lean on somebody. That's kind of a different thing than all. It has characteristics of every adjective you just used, but it's its own thing. It is that unwillingness to be a burden to somebody, even if you have to be.
hmm that's ultimately the block. Because we said we weren't going to talk about the show, but that's why that scene was so awful. Is there was no real growth there. You don't actually see what the character flaw is and how she overcomes it.
Well,
Because
it just became a situation of I'm dying and now it happens, which is I'm I. There was no we, there was no land, there was no nothing. You just have a little flashback of what a child,
whereas
is.
the scene in the book is I've run out of excuses. Essentially, is what RJ is saying is she ran out of excuses. She ran out of there was always some way for her to get around her block rather than dealing with her block. Because dealing with her block meant doing the one thing she was mentally incapable and more importantly unwilling to do, which is
Surrender.
surrender.
Yep. Which is the leaning on somebody.
Exactly. That's what leads us right into that is that it's not just that oh well you're an angry person so you can only channel when you're angry. No, she's angry because she's constantly butting heads with people because she can't work with people. She has to work over people.
Control.
And she has convinced herself that the only way for her to do what she needs to do, which granted, what she needs to do is important. She plays a very important role in Emond's Field, in the Two Rivers, in general, in the group dynamic when she shows up in Barlon. She plays a very important role. What she has to do is important. But she has convinced herself that the only way to do that is control.
Well, and that was part of her situation too, because she had so much. It wasn't just that she was the wisdom, and we saw the back and forth between the women's circle and the men's council, but they were treating her based on her age,
Mm.
not the fact that she was a woman, not the fact that she was the wisdom. They were like, you're a little girl. Even the women's circle would fight her. So it wasn't just the village council. It was the women's circle fighting her as well because you're just a child.
I mean, your title is wisdom. You literally can't have wisdom unless
Hmm.
you have had experience.
Experience, yeah.
And yeah, she by the time we meet her when she's in her mid to late 20s, she's had a lot of experience for someone so relatively young, but she's still pretty young,
Hmm.
especially when you compare her to the Marin and Bran Alvers of
Hmm.
let you know uh let alone someone as irascible as old Sin, who yeah, he's a jerk, but I mean, he's had a lot of experience,
Hmm.
so there is some
Well,
insight
and
even with that guy.
this is something if you are talking to a mid-20s woman, the worst thing you can say to them if you're not trying to start a fight, it's the best thing if you want to start a fight, is to point out how intelligence and wisdom are different, how experience matters. Because they will, I have been around, I know what I'm doing, da, 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 da. And that's the best way to start a fight with a young woman. It really is. And
Well,
then
this
10,
is
10 years later, if you manage to keep the relationship going, they will say, ah, you were right back then.
that's a
And
that's a good point, and I can't help myself, but this is why I think now that she's not in here and the door is closed, I think my wife gets so mad when I point out how everyone we meet thinks she's way younger than she actually is. I don't remember who she was talking to the other day who thought that she was basically thought she was one of the interns at work. So someone just out of college. Okay, she's over 40. We have two grandchildren. Okay. But it's to me that is women want so much. I mean, you see the horrible, pick your horrible example of women who didn't age well because they way too much Madonna, way too much plastic surgery trying to look young, and here she is. She just looks young. Everyone thinks she's people think she's in her early to mid 20s. Okay, they think 20 years younger than she actually is. But the flip side to that is, I think she feels like that means that they don't take her seriously when she is now in a management role.
mhm,
She's a boss, okay? And I feel like she probably thinks that you're not taking me seriously because you think I'm because I look like I'm just out of college,
mhm.
right? And no, I've been doing this job for over a decade, and I'm in a management position now.
We had a marketing campaign around this. Remember the Just for Men, slightly gray,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
was
yeah,
it
yeah,
Touch
yeah.
of Gray? Touch of Gray
Touch
was
of
it
gray,
was
right?
yeah, yeah. And the whole point of that marketing campaign was look youthful enough to have the vitality, but look old enough to have the wisdom.
It's a good point.
There was a
Yeah.
whole marketing campaign around that where you would take this and make it a little less gray, but some of the gray could come out.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's I mean it's for men too, it's a thing. And but talking about triggers and in Nynaeve in particular is she had to learn that. And actually the surrender moment was the big moment because then she became the perfect partner to not Lan, but to Rand because he needed to uh, manipulate Satan, and she needed to manipulate Sadar, and she to cleanse the taint, to do all the big things they needed to do, to have Kalendor at the end of the last battle, all of those things, and she had to grow up for that, and we saw his journey having to grow up too, and they were both young, and those moments were what allowed that to happen. And Lan was a big part of that for her because she needed that love for him to break through that barrier. Because until then, she sacrificed for other people, but she did it from an authority perspective.
Mm.
This is the first time she sacrificed for an equal because she loved him, not because she felt the need to take care of him.
There wasn't an obligation there. There was a desire there.
Well, there was an obligation, but it was a different kind of obligation because
Yeah.
he also went in there to save her. And that's the whole reason he was in that situation.
That's why that scene works so well. That is a great example of um, something that I have ranted about before, that modern writers don't seem to know how or are unwilling, unable, to something you brought up earlier is because everything is power dynamics. So in order to elevate a character, they have to smash another character.
Mm-hmm.
They have to diminish someone else. One of the reasons that scene with Nynaeve is one of my favorites in the whole series, and this was before, you know, I knew this technically speaking, but it was has always been one of my favorites since I first read it. And a big reason for that is because neither one of them diminishes the other. Nynaeve breaks her block on her own. Now, granted, she's thinking about Lan.
No,
A
she's
lot
thinking
of it,
about the child in the.
she's thinking about these things. There is that connection, but it's all internal. Lan comes in afterwards and help and is still important because all right, she got herself out of the boat, but he gets her out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
So, and without hesitation, he went in as soon as the boat went down. So they both have their moments. They both play a pivotal role, but they both do it of their own accord without stepping on the other.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it is what it is the culmination of what they are trying to become and what they ultimately become because they go onto the Windfinder, that they go onto the Seafolk ship and have the captain marry them is complementary. She breaks out of the ship, otherwise he would, because remember she tries to push open the door and it's stuck in the mud. Even if he had swum down there, there wasn't anything he was going to be able to do. But on the other hand, once she breaks free, she's already oxygen deprived and it's a long way to the surface. She may not get to the surface if he's not there to help.
Mm-hmm.
So complementary. It is, you know, symbolic yet substantive, which is just masterful writing. So it's why we we keep rereading this series.
I'm gonna grab a prop, and then we're gonna close it out. All right, hiccup there because I had to grab a prop. Uh, you know what this is?
Quick weld.
Quick weld. For those who are just listening, these are two tubes that both have a chemical in them, and they're both, uh, I guess, a cream by nature. If you really like were to do the consistency, semi-liquid by nature, and you squeeze them together, and then you mix them up, and you weld steel together with it. So I kept many a lawnmower going when the handle wants to break off with this stuff. That's what these relationships, when they're working well, are. You take two things that are completely different and unstable on their own, and you squish them together, and it becomes hard as steel.
It really is the one of the great, um speaking of the style and the skill of Jordan is he beats you over the head with the message, but he doesn't do it so often in the way that, you know, as Critical Drinker would say, modern audiences, when they're writing for modern audiences of the message is, but he tells you clearly, he makes it abundantly clear several times what the battle of the sexes is all about and where it comes from, because we are told multiple times early on that the greatest feats of the Age of Legends, the reason it was a legendary age is because men and women worked together.
Well, and back to the JB Weld here. If I pour twice as much of the yellow as I do of the black, it is not stable and
Mm.
it will break. It will break at the first stress. Same goes the other way. If I push twice as
Mm-hmm.
much of the black than the yellow, it will break the first time you stress it. It has to be a perfect blend of the two working together.
And in this age, called the third age by some, you have a power dynamic. You have a battle of the sexes. The men and women don't work together anymore in that same way, and that has led to a general animosity and distrust for each other
Mhm.
in a way that is very modern. And then the subtlety is the way he shows you that with the characters and with their interactions and their dynamics with each other. Is you see plenty of examples of the bad, of the butting heads, of the Reds who just hate men, contrasted with, all right, here you have Nynaeve kind of started out as one of those, and now here in book 7, halfway through the series, and she finally realizes why she needs to be complimentary, and has found someone to do that with, and it makes them both much stronger.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, not only that is she learned through Lan what she needed to be for Rand. Because notice in the beginning, she treats Rand like a child.
Mm,
But by the time they cleanse the taint, and from then on out, she treats him like an equal.
that's a good point. Yep. And that's 2 books removed from that moment there with Lan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh and it's a it's a pretty quick transformation, but that's only
But it was
because,
also a very dramatic transformation.
yes, but
Yeah.
also there was a lot of groundwork being laid there from the first third of Eye of the World, because they have that first kind of spark when she sneaks up on him and he's like, "Oh, you're something special." And then it grows from there. So it seems sudden, but just think about all the groundwork that was being laid from the very first book.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, from the first conversation they have about how did you track me?
Mhm. All right. Well, hopefully something there was useful to someone.
Yeah.
If for nothing else, almost about an hour and a half worth of rambling about something that isn't real world awfulness, which I guess we'll get to next time.
Well, I think we did a good job of contrasting what we talked about with Egwene and Tylan in the very beginning to
Mm,
what we finished with there, which is the main theme is it's not a power struggle.
yeah.
Sometimes you hold an advantage here and there, but that's because the situation is specific to certain skills or other skills, right? And if you just react to the situation and you don't think about who's on top of who, then it's going to work, man.
Well, next time won't be as fun because I had to take I'm I've signed up for a paralegal course to get started on my eventual law school journey. I decided to go ahead and start at the community college level with their paralegal course, both for financial reasons and for, it's been 20 years since I've been in a classroom, or over 20 years. I should probably ease my way into it rather than just going straight to law school. And
Always good choice to ease the way in. Yeah.
oh, the campus safety video course that I had to go through before I was allowed to register, there were things in there that that hurt my head,
I think I
and
still have screenshots from mine too, because it's probably the same one
or
and
very
or
similar.
very
and
similar.
and
Yeah.
so, the the I took some screenshots of slides of the sexual harassment stuff, and so we're going to get into the real world application of this and why it's awful. And then we might do some news of the day after that, but we're going to stay on the same theme, but then take it out of the fictional example and into and this is where it all goes terribly wrong.
Just funny because in that social psych class that I ranted out about so many times, there were so many times I broke those rules that you just went through, and the ladies in the class loved it. Yeah.
Hmm.
No
Yep.
one complained. No one pointed a finger at me and said, "Ah, you're such a misogynist." Even though I
Yep.
called myself a misogynist once because we had to read the paper on ambivalent misogyny, ambivalent alliance, where benevolent misogyny meets toxic. And I was like,
Yep.
well, you know what? I'm going to continue to be a benevolent misogynist then, if that's the description. And everybody laughed.
it's almost like men and women work well together so long as you keep political power dynamics out of it and let them just be people.
Mm-hmm.
Golly gee, what a radical idea. Well, we'll play around with that next time, and then we'll see what other news of the day we want to rant about. And then next Wheel of Time, if it's a Wheel of Time, we don't know. We're kind of playing this stuff by ear
Yeah,
to see
leave
how much
comments.
more
What do you want to
overthinking
hear?
we can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, we got plenty of overthinking. So
The overthinking never stops with this series. All right, we'll see y'all next time.
later.